58 bodies, 0 fatalities. One woman they underestimated. Korean Mafia boss hired a black woman for protection. She faced 50-plus killers in one night. The lieutenant smirked when she entered the glass-walled conference room high above New York. Rain hammered the windows like bullets waiting their turn. A black woman wearing scuffed combat boots and a leather jacket that had seen better wars. Standing before the Obsidian King himself, Baek Tae-gwan. Lieutenant Beck didn't even try to hide his contempt. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest, and let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. Another guard muttered something in Korean about desperation, making fools of kings. She caught every syllable, understood every insult. Her dark eyes swept the room with the kind of calm that comes from surviving things these men only pretended to understand. She wore her natural hair in tight coils, her brown skin marked with a thin scar along her jawline that spoke of violence survived, not inflicted recklessly. When the hiring manager slammed his palm on the glass table and demanded her credentials, demanded proof she was worth the oxygen she breathed in their presence, Kamina Cross reached into her jacket with movements so controlled they bordered on threatening. She pulled out a single object. A charred mission coin from Djibouti. The kind they don't give out anymore. The kind that doesn't officially exist. She slid it across the glass surface. The scrape of metal against glass was the only sound in the room. My resume is the silence of the men who tried to find me, she said, her voice low and steady, the kind of quiet that makes you lean in to hear your own death sentence. You didn't hire me to be your friend. You hired me because the moon is full, and your head of security is already dead. The room went cold. 24 hours later, 58 professional killers would lie broken across the grounds of Tae-gwan's Virginia estate, mercenaries from 6 countries, assassins trained by governments that deny their existence, special operatives who had never failed a contract, all of them sent to claim the $25 million bounty on the Obsidian King's head. By sunrise, every single one would be defeated by the woman they had laughed at during her interview. Not killed, defeated, broken, harvested like evidence for the reckoning to come. If you believe extraordinary strength can bloom from the soil of suffering, that redemption is not given but earned in blood and restraint, hit subscribe right now. Only people who judge warriors by the softness of their appearance would scroll past this story. Baek Tae-gwan did not respond to her immediately. He sat at the head of the table, perfectly still, dressed in a black suit that seemed to absorb the dim light. Tattoos crept up from his collar, traditional Korean dragons that marked him as someone who had walked through fire and decided to make a home there. His dark eyes studied Kamina with an intensity that felt like a physical touch, assessing, calculating, seeing something in her that his men were too arrogant to notice. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who had built an empire on the bones of his enemies. I didn't hire a ghost, Miss Cross. He leaned forward, and the shadows shifted across his face. I hired the woman who burned down the Djibouti black site. I know exactly what you are. The air in the room changed. Beck's smirk vanished. The other guards exchanged glances that carried the first flicker of doubt. Kamina held Tae-gwan's gaze, and in that moment, something passed between them. Not trust, not respect, something more dangerous. The acknowledgement that they were both apex predators forced into an alliance by enemies too blind to see the trap closing around them. Tae-gwan stood, buttoning his jacket with deliberate care. Follow me, Miss Cross. We have 5 days before they come. I need to show you why you're really here. He led her through corridors of steel and glass, past security systems that hummed with technology designed to keep the world out, until they reached a room bathed in cold blue light. Servers lined the walls, their blinking lights like stars in a digital constellation. This was the heart of his empire, the place where information flowed like blood through veins. I used my syndicate's cryptocurrency algorithms to create a biometric blackout, Tae-gwan explained, his fingers moving across a tablet with practiced ease. Every federal censor in New York thinks you're a ghost. I've been protecting you since before we met. Kamina's breath caught, but she didn't let it show. Why? Because the people hunting me are the same people who erased you. He pulled up an image on the screen, a photograph of his head of security, dead, staged as suicide with 4 words carved into his chest. Full moon, your last. They want the Black Ledger. Taekwon continued, his voice dropping to something raw and honest. Evidence of corruption that reaches into governments, intelligence agencies, criminal organizations across 3 continents, my ledger, my insurance, and now, my death sentence. Kamina stepped closer to the screen, her mind already calculating trajectories, entry points, weaknesses in the estate's defenses. You're not hiring me to protect you from rival gangs. No. Taekwon turned to face her fully, and the space between them felt charged with electricity, with danger, with the gravity of 2 damaged people recognizing the fractures in each other. I'm hiring you to help me survive, Spectre. The same unit that framed you in Djibouti. The same unit that wants me dead before I can expose them. The words settled into Kamina's bones. This wasn't a job. This was war. The war she'd been fighting alone for 3 years. The war that had cost her everything. I don't want your money, she said quietly. I want the target. Taekwon's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then we have a deal. She turned to leave, to begin the work of transforming his beautiful estate into a tactical nightmare, when her eyes caught the security monitor, the live feed of the conference room they'd just left. She froze. Her training screamed warnings her conscious mind was still processing. She pulled up the security logs, fingers flying across the keyboard, and the truth bloomed across the screen in green text that felt like poison. The breach signal wasn't coming from outside. Kamina looked at Taekwon, her voice cutting through the hum of the servers like a blade. Mr. Baek, we don't have 5 days. She pointed at the screen, at the heat signatures moving through the building's lower levels, at the encrypted frequency originating from inside the estate itself. The signal is coming from inside the house. They're coming tonight. The Virginia estate rose from the countryside like a monument to wealth and isolation. Glass walls that reflected the dying light. Sleek architecture that prioritized beauty over defense. Kamina stood in the circular driveway, rain soaking through her jacket, and saw exactly what it was. A coffin wrapped in elegance. You built a fishbowl, she said, not bothering to soften the observation. Taekwon stepped out of the armored vehicle behind her, his expression unreadable. I built a statement. Statements get you killed. Kamina's eyes tracked the tree line, the open lawn, the decorative fountain that would provide cover for an advancing team. How many people live here? 43 staff. 20 are security. Loyalists or paycheck collectors. The question hung between them like a test. Taekwon's jaw tightened. I'm about to find out. Inside, the estate was worse than she'd imagined. Priceless art hung on walls that couldn't stop bullets. Open floor plans that gave attackers clean sight lines. Kamina moved through the rooms with growing frustration, her boots leaving wet prints on polished wood floors that would show every footstep, every drop of blood. She stopped in the main gallery where a collection of ancient Korean pottery sat on glass pedestals. These need to go, she said, already calculating how many minutes they'd waste moving fragile objects while killers breached the perimeter. A voice cut through the space, sharp with offense. Those are 16th century Joseon dynasty pieces. They're irreplaceable. Kamina turned to find a man in an expensive suit striding toward them. Late 40s, carrying himself with the kind of authority that comes from years of unchecked power. Head of household security, based on the earpiece and the way the other guards deferred to him. His eyes swept over Kamina with open disdain. Who authorized letting civilians into the estate during a security protocol? Taekwon's voice dropped to something dangerous. I did. Miss Cross is in charge of defense operations. The man laughed. Actually laughed. Her? Sir, with respect, we have trained professionals. Where were your trained professionals when someone carved a message into your predecessor's chest? Kamina interrupted, moving closer. She could smell his overpriced aftershave, see the slight tremor in his hands that betrayed either fear or guilt. Where were they when the breach signal originated from inside this house? His face went carefully blank. Too controlled. I want a full roster, Kamina continued, pulling out a tablet. Names, backgrounds, access levels, and every electronic device issued in the last 6 months. That information is classified. Nothing is classified anymore. She held his gaze, watching for the tells. The micro-expressions that separated the loyal from the compromised. Spectre is coming. They don't knock. They don't negotiate. They come in waves designed to overwhelm and extract. So either you help me turn this glass palace into something defensible, or you can explain to Mr. Bake why you're more concerned about pottery than his life. The security chief looked to Taekwon, seeking some kind of override, some restoration of the hierarchy he understood. Instead, Taekwon stepped beside Kamina, a united front that shifted the entire dynamic in the room. Give her everything she asks for, Taekwon said quietly, and clear the gallery. The art goes to the vault. The man's jaw worked, swallowing whatever protest wanted to escape. Yes, sir. As he walked away, already barking orders into his radio, Kamina felt the first piece click into place. The staff scattered like roaches when light hits. Some moved with the efficiency of people following orders. Others moved with the hesitation of people reconsidering loyalties. She made mental notes of each face, each reaction. Taekwon moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him despite the cool air. You don't trust anyone. I trust patterns, Kamina replied, already mapping the estate's layout in her mind. And right now, the pattern says someone in this house wants you dead. What do you need? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Kamina turned to face him fully, and found his dark eyes already on her, watching with an intensity that made her breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with tactical planning. I need your gym, she said. And I need to see which of your guards are smart enough to be afraid of me. The gym occupied the estate's east wing, all exposed beams and floor-to-ceiling windows that turned combat training into a spectator sport. Kamina stood in the center of the space, rolling her shoulders, feeling the familiar weight of her body preparing for violence. 3 guards entered like they owned the room, young, muscular, carrying the swagger of men who'd never truly been tested. Taekwon was already there, stripped down to a black tank top that revealed the full scope of his tattoos. Dragons coiled around his arms, their scales rendered in such detail they seemed to move when he did. He was working a heavy bag with controlled strikes, each impact precise and measured. He glanced up when the guards entered, but said nothing, just watched. The tallest guard, buzz-cut and thick neck, sized Kamina up like she was a problem to solve. Heard you're supposed to be some kind of expert. I am, Kamina said simply. Funny, you don't look like much. The other 2 laughed. The sound grated against Kamina's spine, scraping against memories of every time someone had underestimated her, dismissed her, assumed her survival was luck rather than skill. She'd learned to let insults slide off like water. But these men weren't just insulting her. They were testing whether Taekwon would defend his choice, testing the cracks in leadership that could be exploited when bullets started flying. Show us what you've got, Buzzcut said, stepping onto the mat. Let's see if you can actually back up all that attitude. Kamina glanced at Taekwon. He'd stopped hitting the bag. His expression was unreadable, but she caught the slight nod. Permission. Or maybe curiosity about what he'd actually hired. She stepped onto the mat. Buzzcut came at her with the kind of telegraphed aggression that works in bar fights and impresses civilians. A wide right hook designed to intimidate. Kamina didn't even bother blocking. She stepped inside his reach, used his momentum against him, and delivered a palm strike to his elbow joint. The crack echoed through the gym. He screamed, dropping to his knees, cradling an arm that now bent at an angle nature never intended. 7 seconds. The second guard rushed her, smarter, coming low for a takedown. Kamina pivoted, brought her knee up into his solar plexus, and followed through with an elbow to the base of his skull as he folded. He hit the mat face first and didn't move. 12 seconds. The third guard actually hesitated, intelligence flickering in his eyes, recognition that he was watching something beyond simple fighting. He raised his hands, backing toward the door. I'm good. Smart, Kamina said, breathing steady, not even winded. She looked down at the 2 men on the mat. One whimpering, one unconscious. Get them to medical. The elbow needs ice and immobilization. The other one has a concussion. He'll wake up in about 3 minutes. She turned to face Taekwon, expecting satisfaction or approval. Instead, she found something else in his expression. Something heated and dangerous. He was looking at her the way predators recognize their own kind. Not aroused by her appearance, but by her capability, by the clean efficiency of violence delivered without hesitation or regret. You didn't kill them, he observed, moving closer. Dead men can't answer questions. Kamina wiped sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. Pain is a language. When Spectre comes, I need survivors fluent enough to tell us who paid them, who sent them, and who else is coming. Taegwon stopped a foot away, near enough that she could see the small scar above his left eyebrow, the slight asymmetry in his features that kept his face from being too perfect. You think like a torturer. I think like someone who's been tortured, she corrected. There's a difference. Something shifted in his eyes. Understanding, maybe, or recognition of the scars they both carried beneath their skin. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the thin line along her jaw. His fingers were warm, calloused from years of violence dressed up as business. How many? He asked quietly. How many what? How many times have you had to choose between mercy and answers? Kamina's throat tightened. Nobody had ever asked her that. Nobody had ever cared about the cost of the choices she'd made in rooms that didn't officially exist. Every single time I pulled the trigger, the moment stretched between them, fragile and sharp. Then Kamina's tablet vibrated against her hip. She stepped back, breaking the spell, and pulled it out. The security scan she'd been running had finished processing. Her blood went cold. What is it? Taegwon asked, reading her expression. Kamina pulled up the encrypted frequency analysis. The signal she'd detected earlier. It was stronger now, more focused, and the origin point made her stomach drop. The signal is coming from the guest wing, your sister's room. Kamina moved through the hallway with her weapon drawn, Taegwon 3 steps behind her. The guest wing was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes before someone stops breathing permanently. She'd cleared enough hostile rooms to know the difference between empty and occupied by someone holding their breath. Songmi's door was closed but not locked. Amateur mistake, or deliberate invitation. Kamina's instincts screamed trap, but the encrypted military frequency was pulsing from inside that room like a heartbeat, and they were out of time for subtlety. She kicked the door open. A woman sat cross-legged on the bed, holding a silenced pistol aimed directly at Kamina's chest. Not Taegwon's. Hers. The sister was nothing like Kamina expected. Mid-20s, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked like she belonged in a college library, not holding a government-issue Glock with the kind of casual competence that comes from extensive training. Lower your weapon, Songmi said calmly. No fear in her voice, no hesitation. You first, Kamina replied, her own gun steady. Kamina. Taegwon's voice carried a warning. Mia, what are you doing? Songmi's eyes never left Kamina's face. Protecting you from the woman I thought was here to kill you. She tilted her head slightly. But you're not, are you? You're actually trying to save him. Put the gun down, Kamina repeated, her finger resting against the trigger guard. Now. I'm NIS, Korean National Intelligence Service. Songmi lowered the weapon slowly, setting it on the bed beside her. I've been embedded here for 8 months, investigating the security breach. I thought you were the assassin Spectre sent ahead of the main force. Taegwon moved past Kamina, his face a mask of betrayal and confusion. You're a spy, in my house, sleeping under my roof while reporting everything to... I'm your sister, Songmi interrupted, standing, her eyes filled with something raw and honest. That came first. That's always come first. I joined NIS to protect you, not destroy you. Do you really think I'd let them use me against my own blood? Kamina kept her weapon raised, studying the dynamics. The way Songmi's voice softened when she looked at her brother. The way Taegwon's anger warred with something that looked like hope. This wasn't the cold calculation of a double agent. This was family, messy and complicated and dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with bullets. The encryption device, Kamina said, nodding toward the tablet on Songmi's nightstand. What were you transmitting? Songmi picked up the device, handed it to Kamina without hesitation. Read it yourself. I've been tracking Lieutenant Beck for 3 months. He's your mole. He's been selling estate layouts, security protocols, and staff schedules to Spectre since before your last head of security was killed. Kamina scrolled through the files. Communications, logs, financial transactions, surveillance photos. Beck meeting with known Spectre operatives in parking garages and hotel lobbies. The evidence was thorough, methodical, exactly the kind of case building that intelligence agencies excel at. Why didn't you tell me? Taegwon's voice cracked slightly. Mia, why didn't you just tell me? Because until 3 days ago, I thought Beck was working alone. Songmi moved to the window, her silhouette framed against the darkening sky. Then your security chief died, and I realized Beck was just one piece. Someone higher up is coordinating this. Someone with access to your personal schedule, your movements, your vulnerabilities. Kamina's mind was already racing through possibilities, sorting data points into patterns. You didn't stop the murder. I couldn't. Songmi turned back, and guilt carved lines into her young face. I was tailing Beck that night. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I found the body, saw the message, and knew we were out of time. The three of them stood in the room, tension crackling like static electricity. 2 women with guns and secrets. 1 man caught between blood loyalty and survival instinct. Then Songmi's face went pale. She pressed her hand to her earpiece, listening to something that drained the color from her cheeks. What? Taegwon demanded. Songmi's hand trembled as she lowered it. I've been monitoring Beck's communications. He just sent an encrypted text to someone named Colonel Vance. 3 words. The gates are open. The lights died. Every single bulb in the estate went dark simultaneously, plunging them into blackness so complete Kamina couldn't see her own hand. Emergency systems should have kicked in. Backup generators should have roared to life. Instead, there was only silence, and the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Someone had cut the power. From the inside, red emergency lights flickered to life, bathing the hallway in the color of arterial spray. Kamina's training took over, her body moving on instinct before her conscious mind caught up. She grabbed Taegwon's wrist, pulling him against the wall where shadows offered minimal cover. Songmi was already moving, her weapon drawn, covering the opposite angle. Beck's in the wine cellar, Songmi whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant hum of failing systems. That's where the main electrical hub is. He must have. Glass shattered somewhere below them. Multiple windows, coordinated breaches, then voices, harsh and professional, calling out room clearances in English, not Korean, not the language of rival syndicates. These were military contractors, Spectre operators trained in the same black sites that had forged Kamina into a weapon. They're already inside, Kamina said, her mind calculating trajectories, response times, the shrinking window of survival. We have maybe 2 minutes before they reach this floor. Taegwon's jaw clenched. In the red emergency lighting, his tattoos looked like they were bleeding. The wine cellar has 1 entrance. If Beck's down there, then we trap him before he can sabotage anything else. Kamina was already moving toward the service stairs. The root staff used to move invisibly through the estate. Songmi fell in behind her, and Taegwon followed, his hand reaching under his jacket to pull out a pistol that looked like it had seen use before. They descended in silence, each step measured, each breath controlled. Kamina could hear boots on the floor above. Systematic room clearing, getting closer. Professional, patient. These weren't thugs hired for quick money. These were operators who understood that speed meant sloppiness, and sloppiness meant body bags with your name on them. The wine cellar door stood open. Emergency lighting cast long shadows between racks of bottles that probably cost more than most people's cars. Kamina entered low, weapon sweeping corners, clearing angles. She found Beck near the electrical panel, his hands still on the circuit breakers, sweat running down his face despite the cool temperature. He spun when he heard them, reaching for a weapon at his hip. Taegwon was faster. He closed the distance in 3 strides and disarmed Beck with brutal efficiency, sending the gun skittering across the stone floor. Then he stopped, looked at Kamina, and in that pause, in that moment of restraint, something fundamental shifted between them. He was giving her the choice, the power, the decision that would define what kind of partnership this was. Taegwon grabbed Beck by the collar and shoved him toward Kamina. Make him talk, then break him. Beck struggled, his face twisted with fear and defiance. You think you can stop this? Spectre's already in the house. 20 operators, armed with everything they need to level this place. You're already dead. Kamina holstered her weapon and pulled out a small tactical blade. Not to threaten, to show she understood anatomy. She pressed her thumb against the soft tissue behind Beck's ear, the bundle of nerves that transmitted pain signals directly to the brain. Pressure point work. Clean. Effective. The kind of interrogation that left no visible marks but made strong men weep. Beck gasped, his knees buckling. Stop. Stop. I'll tell you everything. Colonel Vance, Kamina said, applying more pressure. Why does he want the Black Ledger? His name's on page 1. The words tumbled out between gasps of pain. War crimes. Djibouti. He ordered the hospital strike that killed civilians. The ledger has proof. Communications logs. Drone footage. Everything. He's not here for the bounty. He's here to erase the evidence and everyone who's seen it. Kamina's hand stilled. Djibouti. The mission that had destroyed her life. The order she'd refused. The hospital full of children and doctors that someone else had leveled anyway. And now she knew who had given that order. The rage that filled her was cold and focused. The kind that doesn't explode but calculates. How many? She asked quietly. How many what? How many people has he killed to hide this? Beck's laugh was bitter, broken. You think I kept count? Dozens. Maybe hundreds. Anyone who got close to the truth. And now he's coming for... An explosion rocked the estate. Not close, but loud enough to rattle bottles and send dust cascading from the ceiling. Kamina released Beck, letting him collapse to the floor. She looked at Taegwon, saw the question in his eyes. Songmi was already at the doorway, peeking out. She turned back, her face grim. They just breached the main security hub. We've lost all camera feeds. We're blind. Beck laughed through bloody teeth. I disabled the acoustic sensors too. Look out the window. Kamina moved to the small cellar window, peered out at the lawn. Heat signatures, dozens of them, moving in formation across the grounds like shadows given substance. Not 20 operators, closer to 50. They were surrounded. They had 5 minutes, maybe less. Kamina's mind raced through scenarios, discarding options as quickly as they formed. The estate was compromised. The security systems were down. 50 trained operators were closing in like a noose tightening around a neck. And they had one traitor zip-tied in the wine cellar and approximately 0 ways out. The armory, Taegwon said, already moving toward the door. We fortify. We hold position until... Until what? Kamina cut him off, her voice sharp. Until they burn us out? Until they use the hostages upstairs as leverage? We can't win a defensive fight against those numbers. Songmi checked her weapons magazine, her hands steady despite the situation. Then what do you suggest? Kamina pulled up the estate's blueprint on her tablet, the one she'd memorized during the drive from New York. Her fingers traced corridors, measuring distances, calculating angles. We don't fight them head-on. We funnel them, control their movement, turn this glass palace into a maze where their numbers work against them. How? Taegwon moved beside her, close enough that his breath stirred the loose coils of her hair. The security systems are down. Manual overrides. Kamina zoomed in on the estate's infrastructure. Your architect built this place with biometric locks and electronic controls, but there are still physical fail-safes. Emergency shutters, blast doors, fire suppression systems. We trigger them manually, create choke points, force them to come at us in smaller groups. Songmi's eyes widened with understanding. The staff quarters have manual lockdown protocols, so does the East Wing gallery. And the server room, Taegwon added, his tactical mind finally catching up to Kamina's. If we can protect the Black Ledger, keep it from Vance. We use it as bait. Kamina looked up at him, saw the moment he understood what she was proposing. Let him think he can reach it. Let him commit his forces to breaching the server room while we position ourselves to collapse the corridor behind them. That's insane, Songmi breathed. That's tactical. Kamina straightened, her voice carrying the weight of authority earned through survival. But I need your staff, the loyal ones. How many can we trust? Taegwon's expression darkened. Out of 43, maybe 25. The rest are security professionals who will run the moment shooting starts. 25 is enough. Kamina started toward the stairs, her body already preparing for the violence to come. Get them to the armory. Arm anyone who's willing to stand. The others lock in the panic room and stay there. We're about to turn your home into a battlefield. They moved fast, climbing the service stairs 2 at a time. The sounds of systematic breaching had stopped, replaced by something worse. Silence. The operators had finished clearing the ground floor and were regrouping for the push upward. Professionals didn't rush. They coordinated. They waited for the perfect moment to strike with overwhelming force. The armory was behind a reinforced steel door that required both a key code and a biometric scan. Taekwon's palm print glowed green, and the locks disengaged with heavy mechanical clicks. Inside, the room was a testament to paranoia and preparation. Racks of weapons lined the walls, body armor hung on mannequins. Ammunition boxes were stacked with military precision. Kamina grabbed a tactical vest, started loading it with magazines. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, each motion automatic. Taekwon did the same, his movements mirroring hers. They worked in synchronization, 2 predators preparing for a hunt, and in that moment, the air between them felt charged with something beyond adrenaline. He reached for a rifle at the same time she did. Their hands touched. Both froze. After this, Taekwon said quietly, his dark eyes searching hers. If we survive, I want you to know, don't. Kamina's voice was rough. Don't say things you can't take back. Don't make promises when we're both about to walk into hell. I'm not promising anything. He shifted closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from him, could smell gunpowder and something uniquely him beneath the tension. I'm just saying that you're the first person in 20 years who hasn't looked at me and seen either a monster or a meal ticket. You see a man. And I see a woman who understands what it costs to survive. Kamina's throat tightened. She wanted to step back, to rebuild the walls she'd spent 3 years fortifying around what was left of her heart. But his hand was still on hers, warm and solid and real, and she was so tired of being alone. We survive first, she managed. Then we figure out what we are to each other. The door behind them exploded inward. A flashbang rolled across the floor, spinning like a top, its fuse already burning down. Kamina's body reacted before the thought fully formed. She grabbed Taekwon and threw them both behind a weapons rack as the flashbang detonated. White light and concussive sound turned the world into screaming chaos. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, but muscle memory kept her moving, kept her weapon up, kept her alive. Shapes poured through the smoke. 3 operators in full tactical gear, moving with the fluid coordination of men who'd trained together for years. They weren't shooting yet. They wanted Taekwon alive. Wanted the ledger's location. Wanted leverage. That hesitation cost them. Kamina fired twice. Center mass. The first operator went down. She rolled left as return fire chewed through the weapon rack where she'd been crouched. Wood and metal exploding into shrapnel. Taekwon came up firing from the opposite angle, his shots deliberate and controlled. The second operator dropped, clutching his leg. The third made it to cover behind an ammunition crate. Smart positioning, professional patience. He wasn't panicking, wasn't wasting ammunition on blind suppressing fire. He was waiting for them to make a mistake. Songmi appeared in the doorway, her weapon raised. More coming up the east stairs. At least 10. Fall back, Kamina ordered, grabbing a smoke grenade from the tactical vest. Songmi, trigger the emergency shutters on the east wing. Taekwon, get your people to the second-floor gallery. We make our stand there. She pulled the pin and threw the grenade toward the doorway. Gray smoke billowed out, thick and acrid, filling the corridor. They moved through it like ghosts, Kamina leading, her weapon sweeping corners, her ears still ringing but functional enough to catch the sound of boots on tile, orders being shouted in clipped English. The gallery stretched before them, all exposed beams and open space. Staff were already there, 23 men and women clutching weapons with various degrees of competence. Some looked ready to fight, others looked ready to die. Kamina scanned their faces, cataloging who would hold position and who would break when the shooting started. Listen carefully, she said, her voice cutting through their fear. They want Mr. Bake alive. That means they'll try to avoid killing indiscriminately. Use that. Force them into rooms where they have to choose between securing objectives or engaging targets. Make every corridor cost them time and blood. A young woman, barely 20, raised her hand. What if they shoot anyway? Then you shoot back, Kamina said flatly. This isn't about heroics. This is about survival. You stay low, you stay smart, and you make them regret coming to this house. Taekwon moved through the group, touching shoulders, meeting eyes, transforming fear into something harder. Anyone who stands with me tonight will never want for anything again. But if you want to leave, leave now. No judgment, no consequences. 3 people left. The rest stayed. 20 people against 50 trained killers. The math was brutal. But Kamina had survived worse odds in places that didn't officially exist on any map. Positions, she commanded. Windows, doorways, any choke point. Don't cluster. Spread out. Make them think there are more of us than there are. The staff scattered with surprising efficiency. Songmi took position near the main entrance, her government training evident in the way she moved. Taekwon stayed near Kamina, refusing to hide behind his people, and she respected him for that even as it terrified her. You should be in the server room, she said quietly. Protected. I should be here. His hand brushed hers, deliberate this time. Fighting beside you. Before Kamina could respond, Songmi's voice cut through the tension. Movement. Main entrance. They're coming. Kamina moved to the window, peered down at the lawn. The operators were no longer in formation. They were spreading out, setting up a perimeter. Not rushing, not making mistakes, and in the center of the group, walking with the casual confidence of a man who'd never lost a fight, was a figure she recognized even from this distance, Colonel Vance. Tall, broad-shouldered, graying at the temples. The man who'd ordered the hospital strike. The man who'd framed her. The man whose voice still haunted her nightmares with its calm justification of atrocity. He looked up at the window. Even from 50 yards away, she could feel his smile. Cold, predatory, victorious. Then he raised a bullhorn to his lips. Kamina Cross, I know you're in there. I know what you're planning, and I want you to understand something before this begins. He paused, letting silence amplify his words. I'm not here for the bounty. I'm not here for Bake. I'm here for you. You're the only witness who can contradict my report about Djibouti. You're the only loose end I never tied off. So here's my offer. Walk out now, and I'll let everyone else live. Stay inside, and I kill every single person in that building until I find you buried beneath their bodies. Kamina's hand tightened on her weapon. Beside her, Taekwon's breathing had changed, gone shallow and dangerous. Don't, he said, reading her expression. Don't even think about it. He'll kill them anyway, Songmi added from her position. You know he will. Kamina knew. She'd known men like Vance her entire career. Men who made promises they never intended to keep. But knowing and feeling were different things, and the weight of 20 lives pressed against her chest like a physical force. Vance's voice echoed across the lawn again. You have 60 seconds to decide. Subject 4. Then we come in. Kamina stepped back from the window, her mind working through the implications. Subject 4. Vance had used her designation from Djibouti, the number they'd branded her with when they erased her name, her identity, everything that made her human. He was trying to get inside her head, remind her of what she'd been reduced to, shake her confidence before the first shot was fired. It wasn't going to work. 30 seconds. Vance's voice boomed. I'm a patient man, but my team is getting restless. Taekwon moved in front of Kamina, blocking her path to the door. His eyes burned with something fierce and possessive. You walk out that door, you die. And then he kills us anyway because dead witnesses can't contradict official reports. I know. Kamina met his gaze, saw the fear beneath his anger. Not fear for himself, fear for her. When had that happened? When had she become someone worth protecting in his eyes? I'm not going anywhere. Then what? Kamina raised her voice, projecting it through the broken window. Colonel Vance, you want me? Come get me. But you'll have to go through every person in this house first. And I promise you, It's going to cost you more than you're willing to pay. Silence. Then Vance's laughter, harsh and humorless. I was hoping you'd say that. Makes this more interesting. The first shot shattered the window Songmi was guarding. She dropped flat as glass rained down, her return fire immediate and controlled. 3-round bursts, conserving ammunition, making every bullet count. More shots followed, a coordinated volley designed to pin them down while the breach team advanced. Here they come, Kamina said, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Remember, make them work for every inch. The operators hit the main entrance with a battering ram. The reinforced door held for 3 strikes, then gave way with a shriek of tortured metal. Smoke grenades preceded them, filling the foyer with dense gray clouds. Smart, professional, exactly what Kamina would have done, but she'd spent the last 2 hours preparing for this exact scenario. Now, she called to Songmi. Songmi triggered the emergency fire suppression system, not the sprinklers, the industrial ventilation fans designed to clear smoke in case of fire. They roared to life, creating a wind tunnel that cleared the foyer in seconds, exposing the operators caught in the open space with no cover. Kamina didn't waste the opportunity. She fired controlled bursts, aiming for legs and arms, disabling shots, non-lethal. She needed them alive, needed them to testify, needed their wounds to tell the story of what Spectre had tried to do here. 3 operators went down screaming, the rest scattered, seeking cover behind overturned furniture and architectural columns. East Wing, one of Taekwon's guards shouted. They're flanking. Kamina had expected that too. She'd positioned the least experienced fighters on the east approach because it funneled through a narrow corridor where numbers meant nothing. She'd also rigged that corridor with something special, a gift from her Djibouti days. She triggered the remote detonator. The corridor didn't explode. Instead, high-frequency acoustic emitters activated, producing a sound below human hearing but devastating to the inner ear. The operators stumbled, their equilibrium destroyed, their sense of direction reduced to vertigo and nausea. They couldn't aim, could barely stand. The staff members wearing the ear protection Kamina had distributed moved in with tranquilizer darts and zip ties. 7 more down, non-lethal, harvested. Taekwon fought beside her now, his movements economical and brutal. He wasn't trying to kill either. He'd understood her strategy, adapted to it, made it his own. They moved in sync, covering each other's angles, communicating through glances and gestures that felt older than the few hours they'd known each other. An operator came through the northern window, rappelling down on a tactical line. Kamina shot the line. He fell 10 feet, landed badly, and didn't get up. Another came through the same window. She was ready, caught him mid-descent with a tranquilizer dart to the neck. He went limp on the rope, swaying like a grotesque pendulum. They're adapting, Songmi warned, reloading behind cover. They're not committing to full breaches anymore. They're testing us, looking for weak points. Kamina knew, could feel the shift in tactics. Vance was watching, learning, adjusting his strategy. He'd figured out they weren't using lethal force, was probably wondering why, probably calculating how to use that mercy against them. A laser dot appeared on Taekwon's chest. Kamina moved on instinct, throwing herself between him and the window. The shot came a heartbeat later. She felt the impact, felt the burn of metal punching through her shoulder, felt herself spinning backward. The floor rose up to meet her. Or maybe she was falling. Hard to tell when pain turned the world sideways. Taekwon's face appeared above her, his hands pressing against her shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. His mouth was moving, saying words she couldn't hear over the ringing in her ears. She wanted to tell him she was fine, that she'd survived worse, that the bullet had missed anything vital, but the darkness was pulling her down, and fighting it suddenly seemed too hard. Pain dragged Kamina back to consciousness. Sharp, focused, radiating from her shoulder like fire spreading through dry wood. She gasped, her eyes snapping open to find herself propped against a wall in what looked like Taekwon's private office. Songmi was pressing gauze against the wound, her hands slick with blood. "Stay still," Songmi commanded. "The bullet went through. Clean exit. You're lucky." Lucky? Kamina almost laughed. She'd been shot protecting a man she barely knew, in a house surrounded by killers, fighting a ghost from her past who wanted her dead. Lucky wasn't the word that came to mind. Taekwon knelt beside her, his face pale beneath his tattoos. You jumped in front of me. Reflex? Kamina managed, though they both knew it was a lie. Reflexes were about self-preservation. What she'd done was choice. Deliberate. Reckless. How long was I out? 3 minutes. Songmi tied off the bandage with efficient brutality. We dragged you here while the staff held the line. We've taken down 26 operators so far, all alive, all zip-tied in the wine cellar with Beck. And Vance? Still outside. He's not coming in anymore. Songmi's expression darkened. He's changed tactics. He's using the captured operators as bait. Knows we won't leave them to die. He's trying to draw us out. Kamina forced herself to stand, ignoring the way her vision swam. Her shoulder screamed protest, but she'd operated through worse. Djibouti had taught her that the body could endure almost anything if the mind refused to quit. How many operators does he have left? Maybe 15. Taekwon handed her a fresh weapon, his fingers lingering on hers for a moment longer than necessary. But they're the best. The ones who survived your traps, who adapted to your tactics. Vance kept his elite team in reserve. Smart. Kamina would have done the same. Let the expendable contractors test the defenses, map the kill zones, identify the patterns, then send in the specialists who could exploit the intelligence purchased with other people's blood. She moved to the window, careful to stay in shadows. The lawn was a battlefield now. Bodies and tactical gear lay scattered across the grass, some moving weakly, others perfectly still. Not dead, just unconscious from the tranquilizers. But from a distance, in the pre-dawn darkness, they looked like corpses, a graveyard of Vance's ambition, and there, standing in the center of it all, was the Colonel himself. He wasn't taking cover, wasn't worried about snipers. He stood with his arms crossed, looking up at the estate like a man admiring a painting he was about to burn. He knows we won't kill him, Kamina said quietly. He knows we need him alive to testify. So he's making himself a target, daring us to come down and take him. It's a trap. Songmi joined her at the window. The moment we step outside, his team closes in from the tree line. We'd be exposed, outnumbered, cut off from our defensive positions. He's counting on our mercy, Taekwon added, his voice tight with frustration. Banking on the fact that we need survivors to expose Spectre's corruption. He's turned our strategy into our weakness. Kamina's mind raced through options, discarding them as quickly as they formed. Every tactical advantage they'd built was designed for defense, for controlling interior spaces and funnel points. Outside, on open ground, Vance's remaining operators would shred them. Unless... The server room, Kamina said suddenly. The Black Ledger. How is it secured? Taekwon frowned. Biometric locks. Encrypted drives. Why? Because Vance doesn't just want me dead. He wants the ledger destroyed. It's the only evidence that ties him to Djibouti, to the war crimes, to everything he's done. Kamina turned to face them both, her tactical mind finally seeing the full picture. We've been playing defense. It's time to make him come to us on our terms. What are you suggesting? Songmi asked. We upload the ledger. Kamina's voice was steady despite the pain radiating through her shoulder. We send it to every international tribunal, every major news network, every intelligence agency that isn't already compromised. We make it impossible to bury. And then we let Vance know that his only chance to stop the truth from spreading is to breach the server room in the next 10 minutes. He'll throw everything at us, Taekwon said. Every operator he has left. It'll be a suicide run. Exactly. Kamina met his eyes. And we'll be waiting in the corridor outside the server room. One entrance, one kill zone. Nowhere for them to flank, nowhere to hide. They'll have to come straight at us through a bottleneck designed to make their numbers meaningless. Songmi's eyes widened. You want to bait them into a fatal funnel, force them to sacrifice their tactical advantage for speed. More than that. Kamina pulled up the estate's infrastructure on her tablet, highlighting the corridor that led to the server room. This hallway has a reinforced ceiling designed to support the server room's weight, but the walls are decorative drywall. We can rig them to collapse on command, bury the entire corridor under debris, while we're safely inside the server room. Trap them, Taekwon breathed. Not kill them. Trap them under rubble that's too heavy to move quickly but too light to crush. Another harvest. Kamina nodded. By the time they dig themselves out, law enforcement will be here. Songmi can claim jurisdiction through NIS, take credit for the entire operation. The operators become witnesses. Vance becomes a prisoner. And the ledger becomes public record that no amount of killing can suppress. Silence filled the office as they processed the plan. It was desperate, dangerous, dependent on perfect timing and the assumption that Vance's need to destroy the evidence would override his tactical caution. It'll work, Songmi finally said. But you need to upload the ledger first. Make it real. Make him believe he's out of time. Taekwon pulled out a secure tablet, his fingers already moving across the screen. Give me 2 minutes. While he worked, Kamina loaded a fresh magazine, her movements automatic despite the tremor in her hands. Songmi watched her with something like respect, mixed with concern. You took a bullet for my brother, Songmi said quietly. I took a bullet for the mission, Kamina corrected, though the lie felt transparent even to her own ears. Keep telling yourself that. Taekwon looked up from the tablet, his face grim. It's done. The ledger is uploading to 15 different servers across 4 continents. Even if Vance destroys the original, the truth is already spreading. As if he'd heard them, Vance's voice boomed across the lawn through the bullhorn. I know what you just did, Cross. I felt the satellite burst. You've made a mistake. A fatal one. Kamina moved to the window, let him see her silhouette. The only mistake was yours, Colonel. You should have let Djibouti stay buried. Now the whole world gets to see what you really are. Then I have nothing left to lose. Vance dropped the bullhorn. He turned to his remaining operators, made a cutting gesture across his throat. The universal signal for total commitment. No mercy. No retreat. Kill everyone in that building, starting with her. The operators moved as one, converging on the estate's entrance with the kind of coordination that comes from years of training together. 15 of Spectre's best, coming straight at them with nothing held back. Positions, Kamina ordered, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd made peace with whatever came next. This ends now. The corridor leading to the server room was narrow, industrial, designed for utility rather than aesthetics. Perfect. Kamina positioned herself at the far end, her weapon trained on the single entrance. Taekwon took position beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Songmi anchored the left flank, her government training evident in the controlled calm of her breathing. Behind them, the server room door stood open, the last defensive position, the final stand. The estate had gone quiet. That terrible silence before violence erupts. Kamina could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the burn in her shoulder where Songmi's field dressing was already soaking through with fresh blood. She pushed the pain away, compartmentalized it the way she'd been trained. Footsteps, multiple. Moving fast. The operators weren't being cautious anymore. They were committed to speed over stealth, desperation overriding tactical discipline, exactly what Kamina had counted on. The first operator rounded the corner. Kamina fired. He went down with a tranquilizer dart in his thigh. The second tried to use his body as cover. Songmi clipped him with a dart to the shoulder. He stumbled, fell, his weapon clattering across the floor. They kept coming, wave after wave, funneling through the narrow entrance, their numbers meaning nothing in the confined space. Kamina and her team picked them off with methodical precision, dart after dart, non-lethal shots that drop trained killers like puppets with cut strings. 8 operators down, then 10, then 12. But they were getting closer. The sheer momentum of bodies was pushing forward despite the casualties. Kamina's magazine was nearly empty. Her shoulder was screaming, and somewhere in the mass of advancing operators, she caught a glimpse of Colonel Vance himself, pushing through his own men like they were nothing more than obstacles between him and his objective. Now, Kamina shouted to Songmi. Songmi triggered the charges they'd rigged to the corridor walls. The decorative drywall exploded inward, metal support beams groaning as the ceiling sagged. Debris rained down, not enough to kill but enough to trap, to bury, to immobilize. Operators screamed as tons of material buried them in place, their weapons useless, their tactical advantage reduced to rubble and regret. The dust settled. The corridor was a disaster zone. Bodies trapped under debris, alive but helpless, exactly as Kamina had planned. The harvest was complete. 58 operators, neutralized without a single fatality. Evidence that would testify to Spectre's corruption and Vance's war crimes. But Vance himself stood at the entrance, untouched. He'd stayed back, had let his men trigger the trap, had sacrificed them to learn Kamina's final card. His weapon was raised, aimed directly at her chest. His finger was on the trigger. "Clever," he said, his voice carrying over the groans of his trapped men. "But ultimately pointless. You can't prove anything if you're dead." A gunshot cracked through the air. Vance staggered, looked down at the spreading red stain on his shoulder, looked up at the figure standing behind him in the corridor. Song Mi stepped forward, her government-issued weapon smoking. "International law violation, Colonel. You just attempted to murder a foreign intelligence asset on American soil. I'm placing you under arrest." Vance laughed, the sound bitter and broken. "You think this changes anything? You think one ledger, one corrupt colonel matters in the grand scheme? Spectre is bigger than me, bigger than all of you." "Maybe," Kamina said, stepping forward despite the pain, despite the exhaustion. "But you're not. And that's enough for today." She zip-tied him herself, pulling the restraints tight enough to hurt. He looked up at her with something like respect mixed with hatred. "You should have died in Djibouti." "I did," Kamina replied quietly. "The woman who walked out of that hospital was someone else entirely. Someone you created. And now she's going to make sure the world knows exactly what you are." Dawn broke through the shattered windows, painting the corridor in shades of gold and amber. Emergency vehicles were arriving, their sirens growing louder. Song Mi was already coordinating with NIS, taking control of the scene, transforming a bloodbath into a legitimate intelligence operation. Taekwon pulled Kamina aside, away from the chaos, his hands gentle on her uninjured arm. "You're not leaving." It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a plea, a promise wrapped in hope. Kamina looked at him, at this man who'd hired a ghost and found a woman instead, who'd fought beside her not because he owned her but because he chose to stand with her. "I've been running for 3 years. Maybe it's time to stay still." "Stay with me," Taekwon said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not as my bodyguard, not as my employee. Stay as my partner. Help me transform the Iron Dragon into something legitimate, something that fights the shadows instead of living in them." Kamina thought about the woman she'd been before Djibouti, the soldier who'd believed in orders and duty and the righteousness of her cause. She thought about the ghost she'd become after, hollow and haunted and alone, and she thought about who she might become now, standing in the ruins of a battle she'd won not through killing but through mercy. "I'll stay," she said finally. "But not to save you, to save us both." They stood on the estate's rooftop as the sun rose fully, washing Virginia in light that felt like absolution. Below them, 58 captured operators were being loaded into transport vehicles. Evidence of a war that had been fought in shadows finally dragged into the light. Taekwon's hand found hers, and she didn't pull away. "It's always been a war," Kamina said, her voice carrying over the morning breeze. "We just stopped pretending we weren't soldiers. But unlike soldiers, they got to choose what they fought for now. And sometimes, that choice made all the difference. Mercy is not weakness. It is the hardest form of strength, the courage to hold power over another's life, and choose to preserve it, instead of destroy it. If this story moved you, if Kamina and Taekwon's journey reminded you that redemption is possible even in the darkest moments, subscribe for more tales of fierce women and the dangerous men who learn to stand beside them rather than above them. Stories where love is earned through loyalty, not demanded through possession, where strength comes from survival, and hope is built from the rubble of broken pasts. Hit that subscribe button. The next story is already waiting.